I need to find a time to go down to a studio space and like actually practice because I haven't practiced singing in a very longer than I would like.
I don't think
It's
I've
not that I
ever.
don't, just mostly because I live with three other people now.
Hmm.
I never have the apartment to myself.
Have I ever heard you sing?
I don't know.
Did you sing
I'm
in that?
good. I am good.
Did you sing in that production that
No, that was a
I
straight
didn't think
play.
so. That's what I thought. Okay. Huh. I
Um,
don't think I've ever heard you sing.
well, you're not
That's not
gonna
a.
right now.
I was about to say that's not a current request. So today I am talking with Lesley, who is the person who put together the Fish Queen show that Julia was in.
Oh yeah.
They basically did this musical in a guerrilla context where it was just sort of a they had the right community structure, they had the right environment, and they just sort of made it happen. And it's got a little bit of a grassroots thing going. So I'm talking to her about the community aspects, hoping to like learn how much intention was involved in getting the ball rolling, see if there's something repeatable or informative enough that someone else could sort of drive a project in this direction.
That sounds really cool. I think it's helpful information to have, and I'm always interested in learning how other theater people make their projects happen.
So, what or like how would you choose to pick her brain on pop-up shows, self-organized community collaborations? What itches your brain on that stuff?
On a very personal level, I'm curious about, from a more just like general theater practitioner perspective, just the logistics of it fascinate me, of fitting all of those pieces together in a way that really allows the final project to shine. Kind of a duck on the water situation. I want to know how hard they were paddling to make it look so smooth.
You know, you said duck on the water, and I had no idea what that meant for a second, but it turns out I have heard that before, just in a very different context.
It's a thing. I didn't make it up. And now that we've had that fun interlude, you go get caffeinated. I will hime you over to the corner.
Neat. Talk to you in about half hour.
Sounds good.
Hey, Lesley. Good to see you.
Hey, Griffin, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
I mean, I'm doing pretty well, but you have been very busy with your surprise musical outburst.
Yeah, it was sort of a surprise. You're referring to The Fish Queen of the Gowanus Canal, which was my big musical project this year.
So that's definitely what I'd love to unpack here. How did you get into doing essentially a guerrilla musical?
People are going to hear me talking about musical theater development, and you're going to think like, oh, workshops. And I had done that the more professional and gotten disillusioned would be an understatement. I found it very tedious and not really conducive to creating great creative work because it seemed to all be targeted around how can you get the most money, and I don't feel that those people always know what
Well,
is the best. And the thing with musical theater too is it's incredibly low volume. There are like 40 houses on Broadway. Most of them do not turn over year to year because a lot of them have a
yep.
show like Lion King or Aladdin or Hamilton that is not going to turn over realistically in the next foreseeable future. So
Right.
there's just like not a lot of churn. Whereas in a movie business, you know, even Hollywood is falling apart now, obviously, but even there is still like churn and demand, and like Netflix has to put out new titles and shit. Not so
Yep.
with your business. There's really it's like tent-poled by this huge tourist industry that does not actually need that much turnover.
Yeah.
So there's just like not a lot of innovation happening in the space. I mean, I think there is at ground level,
Of course.
but you're not going to see it if you're just like going to 42nd Street and being like, what's the new hip thing?
Yeah. Or let's go see Lion King for the 5th time, like we do every year.
Yeah, it's the circle of life, and it lives in you.
Okay, So where did you start out? Were you, what were you doing before this?
I went to the NYU program for writing musical theater for grad school and came out with a really strong education in crafting proper narrative musical theater, I would say, and worked on a project called Medusa for about 7 or 8 years. That was my thesis project with my collaborator named Rachel Dean. And we still hope that will come to fruition someday,
But clearly something changed to take you away from that more traditional approach.
so this was sort of my try at, well, what do I do if I don't give a fuck about the system? Like, I just put it up in my backyard, throw up flyers, see what happens there. And I no shade to the earlier stuff, but like this was so much more fun. It was so much more gratifying. It was like I'm not working with random people, and again, no shade to the random people who I ended up working with before, but just to take it back, me and my roommates had been running something called the Gowanus Salon, which was,
I was gonna ask you to mention that actually.
It's where we got sort of a talent pool for the musical.
Right.
I was sort of running or hosting that open mic, which was the Gowanus Salon. So we just had friends over to our backyard. This is the house we were getting kicked out of.
Right.
And so when it came time to try and put together all these songs I'd written about Gowanus, as you alluded to, they weren't really connected in any sort of a plot yet. But I had all these friends who had been coming over to the salons, and many of them are musical theater performers or otherwise songwriters, singers, and actors. Just asked basically who was around for one weekend in July, and we would just do it. And my partner, Rye, who was also my roommate, created the flyer design, and we just posted them up around the Gowanus Canal, basically. I mean, we invited friends, but we really wanted it to be a neighborhood thing, like come hear about this open sewer that you've been walking by every day. The Gowanus Salon was already sort of a community of really had nothing to do with money. This is another big thing, is like I was able to pay all the actors and musicians for the various Gowanus Fish Queen shows.
Right.
Certainly not as much as they deserve, but I knew that I had buy-in from all these folks because they had all been coming to the salons, and I knew these are just all people who want to share art together. And obviously we all got to make a buck, but like that's a secondary priority to, can we all come together as a community and express something?
I mean, the fact that you figured out a way to like have that coalesce around you in that way is amazing. There was a thing that used to exist. I don't think it's still there. I haven't been able to confirm this lately, but it's come up in my head a few times. In Boston, I think near the corner of Mass Ave and Columbus Ave, there was a building called the Cloud Club. It was a big 5-story, I think, building that was meant to be like a multifamily thing, and it was owned by a guy called Lee Barron. Lee passed away in 2024, and I haven't really seen them do much since then. There hasn't been at least any announcements of any events that I've got wind of, but they, for forever, hosted something, events called the Lost Marble Salon. And similar to what you were doing with the Gowanus Salon, they were doing backyard shows as well as basement shows. And they had this beautiful garden that they would do the backyard shows in. But as far as I understand it, it was a living, working situation with the artists where he would rent rooms to them for super low cost under the expectation, I don't know if it was a strict expectation, but that they would collaborate on like bigger showcases that they could sell tickets to, and that's kind of how they offset the costs of living. But the place was gorgeous, and on the top floor there's a tree that starts on that floor and goes up into this dome like treehouse thing that grows out of the roof and allows you to just like see over the top of everything else in the area. It was a fucking amazing view. They had this whole system set up to build a community, to introduce the outside community to the community of artists, and give them all a place to sort of interact and learn how to collaborate and absorb each other's techniques and styles and modes of operating. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think we need all. It was the kind of thing that I always aspired to, and always felt like, why isn't anyone doing this? And you get to a point with having that dream where you're just like, well, I could do it. I have a backyard, and I can't encourage it enough. It is the best thing I ever did, and it was like so low effort. This is like once a month, and a week or two before I post on my Instagram story. Who wants to come over and play music? This is New York City, There's a lot of people really want that opportunity. They're going to be so grateful. People brought booze over. I barely had to provide shit. It was great.
When I went to the first one, that was one of my favorite things. Because I walked in knowing nothing, and then I'm just like, people bringing like passing around snacks that everyone like just walked in with. I'm like, this is amazing. This is fucking great.
Yeah, so highly encourage that if you're listening and you have a backyard. What's holding you back, my friend? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be once a month. Do it every 3 months. Do it, whatever's sustainable for you. But invite me. That's the most important thing.
That is the most important thing. And I'll show up if I'm in town, which, as you found out, happens a lot more than I would expect.
Griffin is always in town, so it's always going to work.
So let's get into Fish Queen. I know it's evolved, but what's the narrative to this musical?
If I was to say there was sort of a story to this show, it sort of follows like a friend group that is, in a complicated way, we are gentrifiers because this was an old Italian neighborhood, basically, and we were renting from these old Italian landlords. But we are also getting gentrified out because we're like, downwardly mobile artists, and we're being replaced by upwardly mobile yuppies. We're sort of a middle ground there. Gowanus, of course, has been a spot for not only gentrification but colonization, if you go back far enough, and the Lenape tribes that were pushed out of the exact spot that we are in.
Yep.
So we wanted to talk about that and that history. We even, and this is really important to me, really felt insane to be in the year of 2024 talking about gentrification and displacement while the ultimate displacement is happening overseas in Gaza. So I just wanted to incorporate that in a way in the show. Which,
I did love how in every one of the shows that I got to see, like, you guys made a point of getting some charity work out of it and spending significant time in the shows to try to highlight that and get some help sent over.
Yeah.
That was always amazing.
Yeah, and this has been a controversial, and it annoys me that it's controversial thing for the community, because there are some folks who, I don't know, sort of distaste or get discomfort with conflating this stuff that's happening in Gowanus with what's happening in Gaza. And I hear that because on scale, they're completely different. It is not remote. Because ideologically, to me, it's the same basic principle, which is that, like, you shouldn't live here because I, the more powerful rich person, have decided. It's hard to explain to folks if you're not really bought in on colonization as a narrative, as a way of understanding history. I won't spoil for people who might come to see the show the way that those things connect. And in fact, that's one of the most important parts of what we're trying to develop with the show, is to make that connection even clearer and easily readable to audience members. But it's also funny, there's like...
Well, one of the things that I really loved, because I was there for that first Salon pop-up performance because of an invitation from Julia. So even though I wasn't the intended community target, that is how I kind of tripped over all this. I like watching how you've developed it from, like, here's a really loose, easy premise to tie these stories together, to, okay, let's ground and tie these stories together. But seeing how it went from, like, the narrative thread tying it together was at that point heavily more a sort of tongue-in-cheek news report system of, like, a bunch of reporters all named John passing the story around to each other at different levels. And now, like, and I think maybe the third show I saw, with the iteration where like it was a lot more like this is now rooted with a household that is trying to like navigate this, which became a lot more prevalent of a concept.
You know, you can speak to this or not of how much of a plot is actually in there.
I mean, yeah, but we both know the story is being grown around other motives and messaging that you're trying to feed an audience. So, what's the path that you grew into a musical?
I and my roommates were living in Gowanus, Brooklyn, which is a small little pocket of Brooklyn, but is actually the first place the Dutch landed. It was one of the first places in New York that was colonized in 1626 or thereabouts. And now it's the home of a canal, which is heavily polluted. Some say it's the most toxic waterway in the United States. I am one of those people because you can't really, there's no really real way to say what's the most toxic because, of course, all toxins are sort of different and the kinds of toxins are different. So you're kind of comparing apples and oranges. But I feel that this is America and we're number one. Okay, we're number one in pollution. Gowanus Canal, baby. So I had lived there on and off for about 8 years and had been on a stretch for about 4 years with my friends. And our landlords were kicking us out. They were selling. The neighborhood is becoming not just gentrified, but basically a new term called hypergentrification has emerged. To talk about what's happening in Brooklyn, but especially places like Gowanus right now where it is happening so breakneck fast, it's ridiculous. So the entire neighborhood is being bulldozed to.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that when they like basically like force via construction and everything, like restructuring the entire area as opposed to like
there was a massive. Exactly. There was a massive rezone just a couple years ago, spearheaded by one Brad Lander, who our listeners may not know about right now, but they will soon because he's going to be one of the major mayoral candidates going after Eric Adams' job. And this Brad Lander fellow was the Gowanus city councilman, and he pushed through this rezoning. And of course, nothing is wrong with building housing. We obviously have a massive homelessness crisis in this country, but the problem with building it on the Gowanus Canal or right around there is this massive pollution problem. So this was like the industrial center of Brooklyn and indeed all of New York. It powered a lot of New York for about 100 years from the late 1800s into the 1950s or so. So there's just a ton of coal tar and other cancerous waste just sitting right under the surface. It has filled up the canal. The canal is also full of raw sewage because every time it rains, we don't have a proper sewage system. This is
that's the thing I know about the musical. That's what I learned mostly.
That features heavily in the musical. Because the sewage is this is a technological problem we solved as humans in the Middle Ages, but for some reason they haven't figured it out for 2025 Brooklyn. So every time it rains, even like a quarter inch of rain will cause our what's called the combined sewer overflow. And we walk by it, this is just a residential area, and they're building 20,000 to 40,000 new not new apartments, but that's going to be the population change. It's like 40,000 people are going to be moving into Gowanus in the next couple of years. It's already fully underway. Anyways,
I remember seeing the construction going on.
It's crazy. You just walk around there and it changes every single day. But we were getting kicked out of our place by our landlord because they're trying to sell. So I had all these songs I had been writing over the years of living near the Gowanus Canal. And I'm a musical theater writer. And I thought, well, I'd like to do this while I still live here.
So one of the things I want to touch on specifically, because I have been doing something with this, but you have done the musical version of it, where you did have all these smaller pieces that you had worked on over a period of time, and then you found the running theme and found a way to bring them together.
I love that idea. I have a master doc of all of the songs I've ever written, basically all the completed lyrics.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I use that, and some of the Fish Queen things were definitely plucked out of there. I will say it wasn't totally random. Like I knew for a couple years I want to do something about Gowanus, so I'm going to like slightly angle my...
That soft brew in the background slowly, yeah.
Yeah, slowly angling myself that way, but I mean, still today, I'm writing songs. I'm going over for a work session with a friend today to try and work through. In fact, we're going to try and add a rap to Fish Queen. You heard it here first, folks. If it doesn't end up working, then whatever, you know. But you got to try shit. This might be a good way for me to segue into what I think is my way in, I guess, artistically, and that is, you can already sort of pick this up, I think, of what I'm talking about with Fish Queen, but like we were talking about, maybe there's a spectrum of hobbyist to jobist, I guess, in the art world. And
I feel like all the conversations I'm having are going to like hit this at some point, because that is always this weird game that all of us are playing in the creative fields.
Yeah, and I would sort of postulate that instead of just a binary spectrum, it might be a triangle, and the other pin being, you know, art for social change, art for political cause, or thereabouts. And that's something I'm very passionate about. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my parents were both in politics. So I sort of have that thrust to my life and my interests that way. But I really, especially given that we're living in a time of ascendant fascism, and I think it's irresponsible to pursue a life of art and not engage in the world in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, responsibility, who cares? But to you know, you don't have to take it from me. I just think, like, feel strongly that there is a existentially good, fulfilling thing about creating art, and just.
But I do think that even if you're making art without that, you're still trying to stimulate some sort of exploration or response from the viewer, throwing blind pebbles versus like trying to push the water to splash it at a specific thing to see what happens.
Absolutely. I think trying to be apolitical in any time is one of the most political things you can do.
I was going to say, I'm like,
you have no choice.
It's almost impossible. Yeah.
Your work is political. If you're listening to this, if you're making art, it is political art. I hate to say.
So you may as well try to be mindful of that.
So you might as well make it good and correct. But that's real for me. And when I say good and correct, I'm being a little bit glib. One of the things that's held me back a little bit, but I almost don't mean hold me back in a bad way. I think maybe it's good to hold yourself back if this is the case. Like, you know, even with Fish Queen, at this point, I could have put out the music already. I could have tried to make it go viral on TikTok, tried to do all these things. But I am sort of asking myself, well, is this right yet? You know, is this, so I think there's an amount of holding back that can be helpful if you're still analyzing the situation, if you're still trying to craft it into the best argument. And I do think that Fish Queen makes capital A arguments, and so therefore I want to come correct with them. I don't want to just like throw out the bullshit. It's one thing to throw out the bullshit in your backyard or at the coffee shop or whatever, but I do think it's important to make sure this analysis is rigorous, and I'm seeing where that takes me.
There's a great lecture that John Cleese did where he was going into why he ended up with better pitched ideas while working on Monty Python with his collaborators for that. And he's like, we'd have a deadline for Wednesday. On Monday, we'd both have an idea, and then they would turn the idea in, and I would be like, this is good, but I'm going to sit on it. Being uncomfortable with that, like, I'm not quite done yet, but I have something to fall back on, and then by the end of Wednesday, I'd have a better idea than the one I started with, because I was still playing with it longer. And I feel like you're in that phase where you're like, I could just give this now, and it would be something. But if you let it stew a little longer, like, as long as you know that there's a point where you have to pull the trigger, like, you're just giving your brain more time to play is just going to create more connections and more options for knowing what's interesting in how you push it.
I love that, and I love Monty Python, so that's well heard. I would say that the having the deadline is very important in that way.
Yes,
like I
he also puts that very hard on there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm saying, and they certainly probably wouldn't either if you didn't have the deadline. In my case, I have like a producer and a bunch of collaborators who are asking me constantly, "What's next with Fish Queen?" And that
Yeah.
is so helpful. Oh my God, having that is life and death. I mean, it's night and day. Compared to trying to pursue something on your own. So whenever possible, I would say get those collaborators, get them
Yep.
invested. And of course, that means you might have to make compromises to make it really possible to have everyone on the
Yeah.
same page.
But you're usually getting a value add by having them involved than if you tried to push it through on a specific thing that is only the ideas that you thought of at the first pass.
not just a value add, my man, it's a value multiplier, you know?
Multiplier. Oh, that's so much. You're right.
Yeah, because if you're okay, well, I have to I have to take away 25% of how hard I was going to go because I want Sarah to be involved, and Sarah doesn't want that 25%. But Sarah doubles my shit. So, and
Yep.
Sarah means that I get everything done. By the way, I don't know anyone named Sarah, and I would never work with someone named Sarah. If your name is Sarah, it's over.
Does that include both the just ends in an A or ends in an H also? Is it all Sarah?
No, only the H's. I don't fuck with Sarah with an H.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
I just wanted to use a random name. No, but you know what I mean? Like the multiplier concept helps me because I'm like, okay, yes, I can make this compromise. It is okay because, and that is something that took me 10 years to learn because in other really projects tough. I've done, I'd just be like, no, it has to be my way. I can't. And then you'd lose collaborators and then you'd, end up whatever the opposite of multiplier is, you know, divider. So keeping the community together is really important.
Like I've been doing a lot of consulting for tech startups. The biggest problem I see with a lot of projects where they don't work is because the person in charge, they try to control everything, at which point if you keep trying to like correct their movements, you're not going to get anything nearly as interesting as you would if you just let them be them in your playground.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I love the way we've been doing it in Fish Queen is to not have so much a concrete narrative. And maybe it'll get there at some point. But I suspect that if and when we do get it to, you know, wicked level of like, there's a plot, there's a story and a B story and all this shit, it'll probably be based on characters that have been created in this more primordial soup version of the show. And it'll come up together organically that way. Certainly some of my favorite musicals, Rent and Spring Awakening, both come to mind, where I know they were created in workshops with a proper cast of characters. Both of those, interestingly, are based on earlier, like, a century ago works. In Rent's case, it's La Boheme, and in Spring Awakening, it's the play of the same name from 100 years prior. But even within that framework, they like created the characters' personalities really around the actors that they had. Yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that, but fuck yeah, rent. Don't pay your rent. If you have landlord problems, call me. We'll figure it out.
I know you have some, you're in the like reflecting, I guess, and reconsiderations, but I am looking forward to seeing where this goes next. I follow you on Instagram at Lesley Braver, but if people are trying to follow the musical...
Following the show is at Gowanus Fish Queen. Gowanus is a weird word spelled Gowanus, and then it's Fish Queen, all one word. Oh man, you're the best. I will never ever forget the night we did Fish Queen, and at the end of the night, Griffin had sketched every single member of the company and the company altogether, and the band too, I believe, which was like 15 people. And these are like good sketches. I mean, y'all, if you're listening to this, have probably seen some of Griffin's work, but it was fantastic. I have mine around here somewhere. I just moved, so it's under some things, but yeah, that was a really glorious surprise and a real treat. And we really glad that everyone support and having you at every show. You just got to keep coming down to New York.
All right. Well, thank you for chatting with me. And
thanks so much, Griffin.
looked like fun.
It was. The conversation was very interesting. It was very much this is something that they were just hosting casually. Over time, more people showed up, and eventually they decided to collaborate on this thing.
Still good to know that that kind of social networking is happening.
I do like that it was starting as just like a at-home open mic thing, because honestly, there's an open mic near where I live that I'm obviously not a musician or a performer, but Douglas, the person who did the music for the podcast, I met him at that open mic and was able to get him to collaborate via that connection. Lesley seemed very adamant that people should host such things as often as possible. It sort of makes me wish I had more of a community that I have built. I collect creatives, but I don't get to introduce them to each other very often.
Because a lot of your creatives are in New York and you don't live here. So the obvious answer is move to New York.
I have enough trouble paying rent in Boston.
Fair enough.
But no, do you have anything through school that happens like that? Is that a thing?
Like, no, but my going abroad for a year, which I don't regret. It was a beautiful experience and I want to do it again. The thing is, because I was away for a year, a lot of my friends formed connections and like groups of creatives that are now solid and fully formed. So there's not much of a space for me to slot myself into.
Gotcha.
It's not that I am being excluded by my friends. It's
right.
They have other people to turn to for the things that I can offer.
That's fair.
One of my friends said he had a costume design project for me, though, so I need to poke him about that.
Ooh. One thing I did like that she highlighted in her journey was the idea that the songs that are in the musical now, none of them are written with that intention. They were all just...
I didn't realize that.
Apparently they had just been writing songs on similar themes. She noticed that she could assemble those based on that similar theme when trying to put together the farewell performance that the Fish Queen show originally was.
Cool. I like the idea of like repurposing creative material. I've done that a lot where I've written a song and then realized that I didn't like most of it, so cannibalized it for parts, and it's ended up being like 3 different ones.
Cannibalizing it for parts is a fantastic way. Do you know what the term exquisite corpse is?
I think I've heard it, but I'm not familiar.
I didn't know that that was one of the names for it. I've always known it as the Bowie method. This concept of creative shuffling. But Bowie kind of, I don't know, popularized it? Is that the word?
It was a word.
Every time.
I'm not in your head. I don't know what word you're looking for. I can only tell you that the word you said is in fact a word. Because sometimes they're not.
This is true. That is absolutely true. And at least even then, you are very kind. And instead of saying that they're not, you say it can be, which I appreciate. But the lyrics were composed and then cut up into chunks and reshuffled over and over until it felt right, which Exquisite Corpse is a similar idea, but often collaboratively, where everyone sort of adds to a work sometimes it's in specific rotations, sometimes it's just whoever has the idea in the moment, but you just kind of pass something around until you end up with something that is an amalgamation of all of your creative outputs. So it's that Frankensteinian, which is probably not a word, method of assembling parts together to make a new whole.
Nice. I have never had the opportunity to go to one, but I've heard of many songwriting and like creative workshops that are like that.
Oh.
Where you just bring instruments and your own ideas and then you all work on each other's material.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
One of my favorite singers did one with like a bunch of other artists who I also really enjoy. And then like they all posted about it later. They went somewhere for a weekend, each with a song or an idea for a song, and then they all recorded them and they were all on each other's. And it was
I love that.
Just the results were fantastic.
I know this is far less on topic. You've seen The Princess Bride? I have to assume, I think everyone I know has.
Yes.
Every once in a while, I'm surprised. Did you ever see the COVID remake?
Yes. Definitely off topic, but I understand.
I mean, it's not off topic. Everyone sort of filmed their own version, or own scenes, and then it all got stitched together into one huge remake with a constant rotating cast of phone footage.
I feel like the vibe is different.
Oh, for sure, because it's a lot more trustful, less collaborative. Everyone just kind of throwing their own dart, and there wasn't so much communication happening between it. But it
Yeah,
still made
and also
something.
instead of everybody helping somebody else with their thing, it's everybody working on the same big thing.
Yeah, I feel like the Princess Bride COVID version was definitely more of an exquisite corpse route than yours is definitely more of a collaborative, like, I've been using the word amalgamation too much, but that's the only word I can think of, where everyone's sort of contributing and supporting and helping, and it's nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
In illustration, I sort of envy. I envy the fact that other types of creatives have more opportunities to be able to work easily with other people in such a way.
I think the most important part of it is just respect. Like, it means so much to be able to walk into a room full of artistic people that you respect and know that they all respect you as an artist on the same level. Because if you don't have that, then it's really easy to fall into insecurity or imposter syndrome and believe that, like, you're the only untalented person in this room full of great people.
Oof.
But having a, like, tangible sense of being respected means so much for being able to be creative. Having that
Yeah.
security is everything.
I think Lesley said it as creativity multiplier. Just the idea that if
Yeah.
you are collaborating and you get two people who are building off each other, respecting each other, and no one's trying to control too much, that it elevates whatever's happening greater than the combined base,
Absolutely.
which is tough because I've seen a lot of projects where one person tried too hard to control too much and it becomes brittle way too fast as everyone lacks the sense of freedom to play or explore. I do like that with costuming and cosplay specifically, you have a collaborative version of that where you can kind of pair up with people for themed group cosplay stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's
Illustration.
great. My housemates and I are going to FlameCon this year, and one of our friends pitched a group cosplay that has been accepted. So I still need to figure out who I'm doing, but we're going to do Great God Grove, which is a video game
Yeah.
that a couple of them really like. I have watched my housemates play it. I haven't played it myself yet. But that's going to be fun too. I also
Heck yeah.
love that, like, I moved into an apartment where people already love cosplay.
Yes. No, that is. Your apartment seems great.
My apartment is great. I love living here so much.
Well, I know you have to get to your big adult job, so I'm going to get one more coffee to go and start packing up. But talk to you in a few days.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. No, duck on the water. See what the paddles. See what gets the paddles moving. What gets the paddling happening? There's a way to say that that isn't so awkward. This is all staying in.
I know.
Thanks for listening. Head over to shadedareas.com/createartrepeat, all one word, to find out more about the show. Or head over to patreon.com/createartrepeat to support the show and get some neat swag as an option depending on what tier you decide to support us at. And until next time, stay thoughtful, stay playful, and keep creating.